I remember fire. Not red, but blue. I remember running for hours past creatures with no face and friends who no longer looked the same. I remember the criers running through town, chanting that the time had come, that those who saw it had gone beyond the wandering sea. He had warned us not to. They did not heed, and then there was flame. Only flame. For as far as I could see, every house, every street was fire. And I ran. And then I woke. Now I'm here, in a familiar place. When I turn around, I see outside the window the high towers of stone and iron that mark Marhow Keep. But they're not as they should be. Gone are the gilded banners and the shining armor. There's a vile ichor upon the stone. The tower is falling. Does stone rot? I cannot recall, but as I look, it has. All is rot. It's dropping down from cathedrals and attics, slipping into the earth, a weeping black. The fire is gone, but I don't know how. I watched it consume my home, watched it make ash of a city. Yet here it is. All of it. Not ash, but worse, I think. Where am I? Where is Marhow? Where are those who cried out, "We are not awake. We are not awake"? Apologies. I speak as one you know, but we're not friends, listener. You see this only afar. I am Calen, or I was. I'm not sure who I am now. I'm not sure what is now. Don't mistake me, I recognize all things about me. I stand on familiar ground. I'm in the bedroom of my home, but it is all seen through a shadow. The green of my blanket, the blue of my carpet, they're gray and dull. I see beyond the window the red sun is shining, but it looks foreign, like an artist's rendition, an imitation of the day. I'm not weary, though I should be. My last hours were spent in flight across the city, passing things which should not be, things which I used to call friend. And I fought through limb and flesh. I fought so long, but in the end, fire came for me too. Now, though, I feel cold fiber beneath me, just like it should be on a right day, but it's wrong. There's no life in that touch. It's the numb hand on fabric. It prickles the nerves, but it's not true. Where is the flame? Where are the fires that took me? I bore the fierce smell of heat. I choked on the gray ash. But now it's all damp earth and old ground. Where has the fire gone? I hear sounds ahead through the oak door of my bedroom. That was my common room, though I wonder now if it's the same. I don't quite trust this false world. It's familiar and wrong at the same time. The noise is a terrible, slinking thing, like a gas from underneath the lung. Who has come to my home? I have no family. I have no friends. Did the Woken come for me? No, how would they have returned so soon? It could not be them. But if they reach their end, does that mean we all now see true light? This is not what their scripture foretold. There are no fields of green, no clouds of silver. This world is cold. There's no fire here. The brass handle of my door is ice. As I touch it, I fear to open. I shouldn't. Surely this is my home, and maybe I am wrapped in a fever. Perhaps this is a waking dream, but I cannot quite make my fingers pull on that handle. What lies beyond? My mind says it's merely my home, but my heart says I am somewhere else. But I cannot stay here forever. I must go on eventually. The door creaks as I pull. A wheezing, horrid thing. Did it make noise before? It seems like so simple a thing, but now that it happens in the dark, I can't recall. It's opened the barest crack now, just a sliver of dark and empty. There are no lights beyond. There should be lights. If I look back, I can see the sun shining clearly through the window, cold as it is. Why is my common dark? There are 2 windows on my east wall. 2 windows that even in the middle of the night shine with moonlight. I know there are. Even with curtains drawn, I should see something. Why is my common dark? The noise presses closer. Slipping earth and rumbling spit, a creeping mush just beyond my sight. Dare I look further? The window is behind me. Perhaps a jump to the street is the better path today. I'm not high up. And I don't like this noise. No, I must remand my fear. I'm being foolish. It's only a dark room. My heart has taken my mind too far. I open the door. The dark leaps to meet me. Have you ever woken from a dream, but you're not sure you're actually awake? It's a strange feeling. Understand, listener, the grass beneath me is warm, welcoming, as clear to my fingers as any I have touched in the waking world, but I can do no more than doubt it. I see the sun falling down between silver clouds. I hear the chirp of birds and the wind in my ear. I smell fresh rain and living earth, but where is the darkness gone? Where is my dark home? Where is my shadowed city? Where is the fire and ash? Where is the ichor and rot? Behind me sits a small house, or perhaps a shop is the better term. It's not like any house I have seen. It's wrapped in cloth and pouring books out the front door. It stands alone in this field. I see nothing else for all the eye can catch, only blue sky, clouds, and green grass. Surely this is a dream. If it's not, I have lost all semblance of control. Perhaps I have lost all semblance of control. Well, listener, I suppose I must check this house. There's nothing else for me in the distance. I see nothing but horizon. I will go to it. Strange. There is no door here. Only a welcoming frame out of which the books fall. Dreams do not care for realness, I suppose. Surely this must be a dream. Within I find a hall of wood with many bookshelves on either hand, and from an open ceiling above I can see the sun shining through. Books are on the shelves and on the floor as well, tossed here and there as if someone came running through, searching for one and one alone, but did not find it. It's strange, I cannot read the words in them. I'm trying, I see them there, but they confound me. Perhaps it is the dream, or perhaps it is their nature, but I only see a language beyond meaning, scribbled lines and nonsense combinations that offer nothing more than confusion. At the end of the hall I see another doorway, this one covered over by the same cloth as the outer walls. These books are not offering me anything, so I might as well go through. Beyond is a large square room, much larger than I expected given how small the house was, but I suppose it is a dream in the end. A table sits in the center. There's a lit candle and a silver mold atop it, though I cannot imagine why, as the light is plentiful here. There's no ceiling here either, just sun and cloud. On the table is a book, and before it a comfortable chair of felt, as if someone had been reading only a moment prior. But I certainly see no one. For a time I walk about the edges of the room, sliding books out at intervals to see if anything is to be learned, but it's all for naught. Whatever nonsense my dreams have conjured, they are well beyond my reckoning. There's nowhere else for me to go, only bookshelves and books and the way back from whence I came. I resign to walk out into the field, I suppose, for as long as the dream will take me, but as I do, the table catches my eye. I glance to the open book, and with some surprise find that it is written in the common tongue. I suppose dreams do not fail in the end. I will recall what it says for your edification, listener. There were only 3 paragraphs, unconnected, drawn together without any story or narration. The first read like this: "And he found it empty, formless. And being of sloth without vigor, he slept, and his dreams began. Yet nightmares follow." Now, listener, I would be lying if I said that is a line you wish to read in your own dream. I am not eager to find any nightmares when I step beyond the door. But I will go on for the second. It read like this: "He remembered, long ago, of men and their like, for he valued that which was worked, but he had no heart for his own." Now, maybe you have a mind for that, listener, but I do not. Mankind is all I know. Marhow is full of us. We are all men within the walls. But I suppose I am looking a little too hard to understand the meaning of imagination. Here, the last line read thus: "They begat as if from sleep, waking to the world in peace. A tepid life was made, shadowed souls without fierce need. But every whim set strange winds upon them, and in the end they too sought to dream, and to be free of their uncertainty." Now, I will claim no knowledge of those words. They are as much a mystery to me as any spoken by an altar to the sleepers. But I confess a weight on my soul at their reading. I cannot say why, only that it crept up from beneath, rising from the wood floor, latching about my ankles until it had wound its snaking grip up to my heart and rested. I was content to let it lie there, of course, and go on beyond the door to see what it was waiting for me out in the fields, but as I turned, a voice broke upon me from a place above the books. I looked up, and there spied a crow with 3 eyes. and as I looked, its beak opened, and from within came a voice like a woman's. It said, "Hark, traveler, for the ether comes to end. But when you wake, remember there are places beyond the sleep where truer lands lie. If you seek to awaken, look beyond the dark." Thereafter, I recall only dark and light. It was a miasma that shifted before me, offering no clarity, only color. When it faded at last, I stood back in my bedroom, the same lifeless and grim scene before me. I had returned to the odd not world of my dream before. The same dead sun shone beyond the window, the same cold floor beneath me, but before my eyes I beheld the door, which surely I had opened ere I came to the strange field. It was closed once more. Beyond it I could hear the sound, the slithering scrape that had caused me to shudder in my previous dream. Had I come back to the moment before I opened to the dark? Was that possible? Had I dreamed that before, and was I dreaming now? Perhaps this has all been a continuous dream. I don't know anymore. I admit, listener, to being in absolute abandonment of reason at this point. From the dark of the room to the green field and back again, I did not understand anything of what was happening. And where was my fire? Where was the city that had burned? I watched Marhow turn to ash, and yet here it is. I will confess to one moment of clarity as I entertained where to go next. It struck me as unwise to go once more beyond the door, into that room with the slithering sound. I turned instead to my window, the one I had spurned on my last day. It's a second-story window, but the floor beneath is sunken, the foundation dropped long ago by an old fault in the craft. I can leap it pretty easily. I reached for the wood frame to lift and take my leave of my bedroom, but stopped. For the first time since I arrived in this strange world, I saw my own hands. They were thin and frail, bereft of the vigor I once had. I'll make no claims to magnificence or legend. I was only an average man, but I recall without a doubt that my fingers had been full and my wrists were thick with work. Now my fingers are rail spikes. Beneath them is a hand that threatens to crumble in the breeze. I fear that the rest of me may look the same, but my mirror is in the common room, and I will not open the door to go find it. Perhaps I can find a stranger in this seemingly lifeless world and ask them what has become of me. The window opens with the will of a dying branch, creaking and bending in a manner it should not. Does glass bend? If it does not, then I am not sure what I just saw. The glass shifted as I lifted the window, like water rippled by a stone. No matter. It opened in the end. I prepare to leap, but I halt with a foot on the sill. There is a smell in the air, a bitter taste in the breeze, like alcohol poured on dry earth. It is piercing. It climbs into my lungs and knocks on my teeth. Even with a held breath, I still feel it crawling, wrapping around my nose, threatening to hit me again if I dare inhale. Eventually, I blow out and take another breath, as I cannot hold it forever. The second is not as bad. It was as if the smell had built on the edge of the window, pressed against the glass, but fell apart as soon as it gained more room. Very odd. I drop to the street and stand to gather myself. The cold of my room has followed me out. The street is as cold as a winter morning. I expect to see frost on every corner, though I find none. And oddly enough, my breath does not fog before me, even as I shiver. My street, Solar Row as it is known, goes at an angle, with the northern way rising on my left and the southern falling on my right, till it bends away a few houses down and disappears towards the market. Across from me is a pavilion of stone lined by an iron fence. Beyond the fence lies a cliff, which looks out over the city of Marhau. It's a sight I have taken 1,000 times. Sprawling brick and stone, hidden beneath roofs of wood, with iron veins poking up to store the lightning. To the east, high above the tower of Marhau Keep, stand statues of creatures, both mythical and foul, looking down with their wings spread wide. The spires are so high they cast shadows even here over the hilltop homes, and on a better day, on a real day, the sun should have been glimmering off the iron and steel that gilded them, showering my overlook with 1,000 unbidden stars. It used to annoy me, that light, coming always in the evening when I was longing for peace and comfort, and glaring through my window like an angry trader unhappy with my pricing. Now, though, now I long for it. Black rot seeps down from the tops of the keep, sloughing off into the courtyards hidden beneath the homes, resting amidst a dark city. The sun is still there, hanging above the clouds, but its red gaze is somehow lost between us, falling on empty places and languishing in gray shade. And now I realize a greater worry. Where is the noise of Marhau? Where are the shouting traders and the angry wives, the children screaming in hidden rooms, or the clang of iron workers about their duty? Where are the proselytizers that clamor day and night for us to heed their scripture? The city is silent. I do not even hear wind. The only noise is my quickly rising heart, and from behind, the slithering dark. I realize I will find no answers there staring into the empty city, so I turn north to see if the hilltop ledge will show me something new, perhaps an answer as to why the city is so foreign right now. I go along, passing along the faces of slant houses and draped windows. Not a single one of them are open. Not that I would blame the inhabitants, mind you, for wishing away the cold light of the sun, but I wonder how all, down to the barest basement slat, remain closed away behind curtains. Did those basements even have drapes before? I feel that they did not, yet that's not the sort of thing you remember with clarity. A man spends his life wandering with an eye on the road and another on the sky, but rarely is he caught by the shape of the iron fence or the color of his neighbor's curtain. Yet, were Eric's curtains not red before? And were the iron rungs not in the points of spears instead of these ghoulish faces I see on each end? I hesitate to answer, as I can only recall the barest pieces of the past, but I cannot help but think they were not this way. Before the fire, that is. And to speak of, did I not see Sulla Row burning? That night comes to me in flashes, just quick memories passing through in chaos, but I remember clearly there were flames across the hill. Flames that blocked even the road for those who would climb higher. Entire rows of homes had become ash. Mine had not been engulfed, but I recall that it would have been soon. Yes, I remember now. I had returned home to gather my belongings so I could flee the city. I don't own much, I'm not wealthy, but I have a few things I would not wish to lose, and I had come back, passing by, I am certain, the iron spears of the fence, and turning past the red curtains of Eric's, which were already embering. Then I came to my home, and I remember nothing else but cold gray, and then my strange evening prior. Was the fire a dream and this the waking world? Has it all been a dream? I don't understand what's happening here. If this is a fever, it is the strangest fever I have ever endured. Surely no fire has been on this road for an age. I am not even sure a fire could live here. There's no heat at all beneath the gray gaze of this sun. All the homes stand as they have for all the years I've known them. Stone and iron, points and overhangs, with no love or feeling. The shadows beneath them are deeper than I remember, and there is something not quite right when I look. Like a painting that is tilted ever so slightly to the side. My eyes seek to correct, but they're not quite sure what it is they should be correcting. Yet, the unease builds as I stare. I would turn and go south, but that way is no better. The shadows of Marhow Keep fall there, and where they lie, a deep dark has taken hold, a dark unlike any I recall seeing before. It's like the world simply ends in shadows. Nothing else can be seen beyond them. Far away I can see the sky, and vaguely I can make out the forms of the homes cast in black, but I can make out nothing real in between. I don't like that way. I continue on, and at the top of the hill I stop. Another fault has found my eye. The plateau, which of old ran to the west before it found the last stretch of rising road, now lies a shattered hole before me. Mind, listener, I do not speak of a drop or merely a dug ditch. I speak of a hole. This is a cavern. It's as if a great spoon has dug into the world and lifted out as much as it could. The road simply stops. The houses end. The iron fence dangles over the edge with a creaking sigh. Where before there had been a park of paved stone and high lampposts, now the world simply yawns. And far below, shifting in the shadows cast by this new dearth, a white fog roils. Is there something moving within that fog? I might believe, though I cannot be sure. The strange shapes go back and forth in the cloud. Long limbs dragging over bare earth and pulling something of no worldly form. Ah, another dreamer come to see the waking world, a voice suddenly says from my side. Now I'll not pretend bravery here, listener. I yelped without shame and crawled back on my hands when that noise came through. It was the first I had heard in this gray world. And it was rude, I know, but a man should be forgiven for reacting in such odd circumstances. The giver of the voice deserved no such fear, though. I beheld an elderly man, or at least one bent with work, though I could not see his face. He sat on the stoop of the last house before the world fell away, leaning on his knees and wearing a wide-brimmed hat that hid much of his features. His hands, like mine, struck bony shadows over the stone, hanging between his knees with all the power of a skeleton propped up. One might be forgiven if they assumed he was dead, so gaunt was he. But that notion was put aside when he lifted his hat, if only a little, and I beheld a grim chin move up and down as he spoke once more. You look a bit worn compared to the rest. Sleep late, did you? Ah, no matter. Everyone comes up in the end. Apologies, sir, but I don't think I know you, I said, and I was not lying. The house before me had, in my realer flaming world, belonged to Micah, or Meacher, as he was called, though I don't recall how exactly he earned that nickname. Micah was no friend of mine. We met each other on occasion, and I knew him by name, but I don't recall ever having him to my home, and I had been in his only a couple times. He was a young man, though, of 20-odd years. That I knew for sure, and this fellow could be no younger than 60. Don't know me. None of 'em ever know me, the man answered. All wisp and willow, forgetting the day. Where'd you wake from, lad? I don't see what you see. This place, it's all the same to me. I'm not sure what you're asking, I answered slowly. If you asked for my city, then it was Marhow, which I believe is this city, though it looks different, the man inquired. He raised his hat then, and I nearly screamed. The face beneath was barely alive, pock skin drawn taut over bone and a nose that had forgotten to grow out. All of it set over impossibly thin lips. The eyes of the man were white and clear, a sign of blindness, or so I would guess, but he seemed to perceive me clearly, and he stared right into my own. Yes, different, I answered, doing my best not to shake. That happens here. Almost the same, not quite. Not more how, though. You're long past that, lad. I frowned, naturally skeptical of such claim. This was clearly Marhow, even if it was not as lively or as true as I remember it. What do you mean? I asked. This looks like my city. See, that is Micah's house you are sitting on. I'm sure he is inside if you will let me knock. Nah, no one inside, the man said. No inside to be in. Can't enter what isn't there. I was, of course, quite certain that he was insane at this point. After all, I had been in Micah's house before, even if it was only on a rare occasion. Oh, I will be off then, I told the man, prepared to leave as I was. The southern road may have been dark, but if this fellow was not there, I would rather challenge it. No, nowhere to be off to, the man said. Your arrest, lad. Your arrest, lad. Past the walls are only dark and those that eat it. You don't want to be out there. I'm certain I have no idea what you mean, sir, I said as I turned and began to go towards the south of the road. Oh, you shall. You shall, the man said. I looked back. He had returned to his stooping stance, head bowed, staring into the stone. Well, nothing for him. I was not going to sit and listen to a crazy vagabond. There's enough nonsense going around in this dream. I returned swiftly to my house where the window I had leaped from still sat open. That, at least, had not changed, though I could swear the sound was nearer now. Slinking sound was nearer now, as if it entered my room when I was out. Not that it mattered, I was not returning. I kept on, heading towards the south road in the looming shadow of Marhow Keep. The homes rose on either side, replacing the expansive view with walls of brick and featureless windows, each shrouded by a curtain. Before me loomed the dark, the formless, shapeless dark. I hesitated at the edge, wondering what exactly I was looking into. It seemed to be the pitiless night, the empty sky in the midst of a cloudful storm. It seemed to be the pitiless night, the empty sky with no stars and no moon. Finally, I gathered my courage and stepped into the shadow. As I did, a noise like growling thunder boomed out, and I saw only dark. By now, listener, I think you know the field where I woke. Green grass and blue sky, so far as I could see in all directions, and amidst it all the small house of cloth and books. I went to the house, not to enter this time, but merely to peek within. I was sure now that I was in the midst of a fever, and the thought of entertaining three-eyed crows and dusty shelves did not entice me. Who knows what nightmares my mind would conjure in this fever dream? I looked within and found it still the same. The books lie as I remember them, the cloth was still fluttering in the breeze, but I did not go any further. I didn't care if there was a crow within, and I certainly didn't want to find out if the books had changed their text. I turned aside and faced the greater plain around me. In all directions, it was only green grass and blue sky. I could see nothing to offer me a path, but in the end, I figured it is a dream, so maybe I could simply walk and the dream will change after a time. And seeing as there was no better way to go, I decided on the direction opposite the door. I lowered my head and pressed on into the blue. Hours passed. Hours of walking without end. The sky never changed. In fact, as I lingered and watched, going on, feeling at my hands the blades of grass, I don't think I saw the clouds move even once. It is like I'm walking into a painted picture. I always turn about to find the scene as I left it, the house barely distant. I cannot discern if I have gone even a mile, or if my dream has allowed me to gain any ground at all. Yet, there was little point in returning, so I went on. I bowed my head and closed my eyes, and set my feet in the direction I had chosen. Perhaps when I opened them again, I would see something new. Alas, for that reason, I did not see what suddenly opened before me. I was walking along, green grass at the feet and a warm sun on my back, and suddenly I felt a sensation of falling. By the time I opened my eyes to see what had come of me, it was only dark as far as I could see. I woke once more in my bedroom. I growled in frustration. Whatever strange virus had me in its grips, I wished so dearly it would free me. At the very least, it could kill me, rather than this hell of repeated dreaming. I resigned myself to another dark imagination. I went to the window, and once more was shocked to find my frail hands. Had they not been healthy in the green fields? I cannot quite recall. I feel as if they were, but when I think back to that place, I see only the static sky and the house with the books within. Perhaps when I wake, I will seek a priest rather than the apothecary. Certainly whatever is troubling me is not only an illness of the body. My mind is troubled by something much, much deeper. I threw up the window, and it should be said, with some frustration. The noise in the common room halted briefly with the clash of wood, but quickly resumed as I fumbled my way out. The city of Marhau was exactly as it had been in the last, gray stone and red sky, lifeless and cold. The southern way had been the end of my last excursion, and only the long cliff waits beyond the railing, so I decided to try once more the northern hill. Perhaps that pit at the top had a way around it. I did not linger and look, so distraught was I at the strange man. Maybe I had missed something. Who knows? Perhaps the pit will not even be there this time. Who is to say what comes of a dream? Of course, listener, I am sure you can guess that I found at the top of the road the same pit, and beside it, with a bowed head and wide-brimmed hat, the man who had spooked me on the last trip. "Back again, yeah?" the man said, raising his hat only far enough to see his terrible chin. "Who are you?" I asked with no small amount of irritation. I was quite finished with this nonsense of dreams. "Me? I'm nobody important. You're the one here for work. I'm just an observer. Fly on the wall." "I don't think I believe you," I replied. "You seem to know more about what is going on here than I do. When will I wake up?" "Wake up?" the man said quizzically. I see now. Sorry, lad. Thought you understood. Waking up is for those who sleep. You're not quite there." What? What do you mean?" I asked. The man lifted his head, revealing once more the horrible pocked cheeks and the blank white of his eyes. An even tone took him, and he recited, "A tepid life was made, shadowed souls without fierce need, but every whim set strange winds upon them, and in the end, they too sought to dream, to be free of their uncertainty. A chill swept up my bones. I know those words, I said. I read them in a book, in a dream. Ah, yes, that one was a dream. You're inching closer. He shocked me then by standing, and I make no exaggeration, listener, when I say there came from him a sound like the breaking of bones or the unwrapping of brittle cloth. He reached out with a withered, gnarled hand, and from his palm revealed a pendant of strange shape. 3 eyes set upon a white diamond, encircled by a cloud of silver. This he gave to me, and he said, "Take this here. You'll be sleeping again soon. Let that old maid see it. She'll send you on where you need to be." What? I don't understand, I said. I held the pendant in my hand. It was cold, like the world about me, but there was an odd realness to it that the stone beneath my feet did not share. "We'll talk again," the man told me. Then he held out his hand in embrace. I took it, hesitantly, it should be noted, and shook lightly, lest I injure him. But I was surprised, for I found there was some vigor in his grip. "I am confused," I said. "I don't understand what is going on." "None of them ever do," the man said in response. He smiled, a horrible, toothless thing. "Call me Neater. You'll see me again when you reach the first one. No time left here, though. Too much wasted on the last. A proper greeting waits at the cord. For now, off you go." Without another word, he reached out and with both hands shoved me. At that moment, there was a sound from all around, a trembling gasp that reminded me ever after of a sick man breathing his last. From the great pit at the hilltop, a cloud came forth, black and viscous, as rotted as the stones of Marhow Keep, and it lifted over me and Neater. Even as I fell, I looked back and saw Neater tip his hat towards me, a strange, content smile on his face. Then darkness consumed me once more. If your guess, listener, is that I woke thereafter in the green field, then congratulate yourself, for surely I did. Once more I opened my eyes to blue sky and the cloth house. This time, however, I entered the dream not alone, for in my hand remained the pendant, still cold to touch. I looked at it. It felt strange. The warmth of the sun about me still lingered, falling down from the ceaseless sky, but it did not seem to touch the pendant. That pendant was cold, continuous, like the grave, and it did not relent. I stood and looked about. For a brief moment I contemplated going forth and seeing if this time I could catch what happened to me that caused me to tumble. But first I decided I would look within. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a change to the dream that would allow me to finally be free of all this. Maybe one of these silly books would have an answer, or perhaps that crow would talk to me and show me a way out so that I could finally wake to the normal world. I pocketed the pendant and brought it with me as I went inside. I had no clue who the maid was that I would show it to, but perhaps the crow would know. It is as good an answer as any in a dream. I went swiftly to the inner room, ignoring the bookshelves and the scattered pieces on the floor. Within I saw once more the table and candle and the chair before it, but there was no crow here. The shelves were empty. There was only the chair, the table, and the singular tome upon it. I frowned. This dream was confounding me. Everywhere I turned, it seemed only to stonewall my attempts to get out. I only wanted to be done with it. My next thought was to leave and see if perhaps I could find a way through the fields this time. I had fallen before, so Perhaps with open eyes, I would find the path and leap across or skirt around it. I don't know. I've run out of answers. But as I stepped to the dividing curtain, my eye caught again upon the book on the table. There was a change to it. Gone were the 3 paragraphs I had seen before, replaced now with only one verse. It read thus: "Between all waking worlds, the dreamers sought to roam, but found themselves lost in places not their own. So they sought to wake, and their fervor grew, until at last it burst and became something dark." I will not pretend I can make anything new of these words either. They're nothing to me. However, at their end I looked up, and I beheld atop the bookshelves once more the 3-eyed crow. It stared down with a tireless gaze. I waited for her to speak, as she had before, but the time passed for moments, then minutes, until I realized, finally, this was not how it would be. "Do you know who I am to show the pendant to?" I asked the crow, feeling both foolish and hopeful at the same time. There was no answer, only the staggered blinks of 3 lids, unnerving as it was. The foolish part of me won out then, and I shook my head. Surely I was giving too much thought to this dream. There was no house. There was no strange man beside an empty pit. I was no doubt stuck on a bed somewhere, caught in a fever, tossing and turning in a nightmare that would not end. I tossed the pendant on the table, heard it fall, but not seeing it, as I turned to leave once more. "Cast aside your mark at the peril of one's own soul," a voice called out. I turned, expecting to find my 3-eyed speaker, but stepped back in shock, for the crow had gone. In its place atop the bookshelf sat now a woman, garbed in black robes which fell beyond her feet. Her face sat hidden beneath a dark cowl, and a veil of black lace was on her lips. 3 feathers hung about her neck on a clasp of bone. "Who are you?" I demanded. The woman tilted her head, but did not answer. She only pointed down at the pendant I had cast aside, which sat now in the middle of the book. I took it back, then demanded once more, "Who are you?" With the pendant now in my hand, the woman lowered her own. "Names change where waters end. I am here but a guide." "Fine, then I will call you such," I growled. "Why can't I wake up? This is obviously my dream, so release me to wake and see what illness besets me." "An illness besets indeed, wanderer, but not that which you speak of," Guy had answered. "Whither hands or feet may tread, all roads come here in time, that I may see them on." I don't know what that means," I sighed. My frustration was falling to a resigned distaste. Maybe I would never wake from this dream. Could it be called a dream then? Would even nightmare be the right term? It didn't matter. I was beginning to fear I would always remain, doomed to repeat whatever cursed cycle this imagination demanded. "You know not, for you only stir, but these are the first mumbles of rising," Guide said to me. I sighed once more and fell into the chair before the table, dropping my head into my hands. "Fine," I said. "If you will not answer me, at least cast me a better dream than what I see here now." "Oh, dreamer, you do not understand," Guide said. "Dreams arrive by thoughtless ways, but the dreamer calls them not. You have seen the inner place, but outside the truth is found, beyond the wilderness and worry. To wake at last, the sleeper must be roused." "I don't understand," I said. There was no response. I looked up. My guide was gone. The bookshelves were empty. "Excellent," I said. Increasingly angry, and seeing no other option, I rose once more to leave. I turned back and swept aside the curtain, but stopped. The hallway had changed. Gone were the bookshelves and the books cast across the floor. Hidden was the blue sky and bright sun, which I saw even now behind me in the room, falling down into the inner square. Now the hallway was dark. Not entirely. I saw in shades of deep gray forms and things here and there, a rail by the side of a stoop, a step before a door, but now I swore, impossibly so, that I looked upon a narrow streetway, perhaps an alley in a city. The sky above was black with night, cold clouds shifting over starless seas, and down beneath walls of stone and iron. I thought at once that I beheld Marhau, though in a midnight before a storm, but as I looked, I could not convince myself this was my city. The stone was gray, the color of an ashen earth. The iron was rusted, as if with age or neglect, and it took no pattern that I recognized. My city was a place of edges and looming figures, old-world architecture that came from sinful sermons and raging proselytes. This stone was of a different kind. This was power and earth, white brick which brooked no intrusion. I had seen similar architecture, not with my own eyes, of course, in books. Marhau was not the only city of men in the world. In far Curum they built castles with mighty walls, places for kings and queens and those who served them. I'm not sure how my dreams will conjure this place. I know from pictures the various means and make of that far city, but to pull it into my own world seemed well beyond my imagination. I had never left Marhau, save once, to go beyond in the fields when I was young. How could I be here looking out? I looked back one last lingering time. The guide was gone. The room, the inner room, seemed darker now. I could still see the sun shining down from beyond the square, and I could see the clouds there, but there was a dimness to them, as if a curtain had been pulled across the entire world, and it was only growing darker. A sound reached my ear, coming not from the alleyway behind me, but from somewhere beyond the open sky. A sound like wind, but coming near. A rushing of grass and leaf, perhaps even footsteps among them. I cannot explain why, but my soul was unsettled to hear that sound. I turned and faced the dark, this dark and stony place, a place that I had never seen before, yet seemed somewhat more familiar than this dream world behind me. And I decided then there was only one way to go. I would go on and see what this strange new place had to offer me. There came a moment as I went forward into the shrinking alley of this stone world where I began to truly doubt my persistence in a dream. It was not a full revelation, only the nagging beginnings of what might come to be horror if I never woke. Each step was drawing me deeper into unfamiliar land. A straight path was before me, without bend or rise, and on either hand stood what I presumed to be the homes of wide stone and heavy iron lading, but which could have been shops or businesses in the light of day. I say the light of day, for I beheld them only as forms, shadows in the lightless night. I perceived nothing of them which might hint of their purpose or those who saw to it. It was only darkness before me. I went on for some time, though how long I can only guess, for never did a star appear or the moon rise to guide me on, and I beheld no lights in the windows or even the glint of far flames. There was a pale light somewhere, far, far above, beyond the walls, a shade that only let me discern the top of the city from the sky which swallowed it. This gave some aid to me as I walked, but even with wide eyes I could see only the gray outlines of stone and the high peaks of the walls. So absorbed was I in avoiding a misstep, or worse, running headlong into some obstacle, that I did not realize until too late that I was far, far beyond the initial door I had come out of. When I looked back, I saw only darkened night, with no sign of anything else. The prospect of returning once more to my dream of sunny skies, though enticing, seemed well out of reach in that moment. It was only then, while I stared back into the path I had walked, that another realization reached me. I had heard no sounds in the city. Do not mistake me for saying, listener, that I heard muted sound, or that I beheld nothing odd in the normal melody of night. I mean with all certainty that I heard nothing. No wind, no scraping grate or settling earth, not even the bay of cat or dog wandering stray in the alleys. It was silent. I stomped my foot then, if only to reassure myself that there was still noise in the world. It echoed, deep and long, bouncing away towards the road I had come from, bringing me some small relief, though it was swiftly replaced with worry. For now, having tested it, I realized that I should hear something. Even the deadest graveyard stirs with a breeze at odd and ghostly hours. Even a casket must creak now and then. I resolved at that moment, amidst the unnatural quiet, that I would return once more to the way I had come. I had seen no cause for concern in this quiet land, but the very weight of it all was beginning to settle upon me, and I was more than tired of odd dreams and strange tidings. I took a single step towards the dark behind, but paused as I landed. A second sound came from the dark, an echo of my own footfall, which, at first, I believed to be truly that, only an echo, but which I found to be oddly staggered. I can only compare it to a child mimicking their parent, doing their best to keep up, but always a moment behind, for they cannot predict the next action. I stepped once more and waited, and once more I heard, staggered against my own, an echo that did not quite match. Amidst the dark and lightless world, I found it hard to discern where this second sound came from. All directions were the blackest tunnel, and I could make no other form but the vague shape of the road. A fellow wanderer could have stood mere feet from me, and I would have been no wiser. That thought brought a chill to my lungs, and I shuddered against the dark, realizing then I may have been followed for the entire time I was in this world, unaware as I had been, trying to make my way in this grim place. The more confounding, however, was my inability to recognize where the second noise came from. In the dark, all noises sounded near and far. My own breath might have been 100 yards distant or never left my mouth. That unknowing mystery held me in place. I was rooted. I had no inkling that this echo was dangerous. After all, surely someone would live in a city like this, and their wandering in the dark is no more evil than if I were to take my own nightly stroll in Marhow. Yet, it can be said the rational man has no place in the black night. Every slim form was a malice-filled spirit, and every shade was a ghoul in waiting. A plan came to me then. I stomped rapidly in place, a few steps in succession, and then halted. On cue, as if it were somehow aware of my thoughts, the staggered echo began. Only this time I beheld the sound, for it lingered a few moments longer than my own. It came out of the dark behind, a cacophony between me and my return to sun-filled lands. I saw nothing still, but I heard a nearing something, the stomp of boot and stone, and beneath it, subtle enough that I could not be sure it was true, a scrape like metal that quickly faded. I'll give no pretense of bravery, listener. I turned on my heel and hurried away, though I did not run, as the way ahead was treacherous still in the dark. Behind me I heard the return of my shadow. Staggered footfalls followed me, never hurried or even increasing, just slightly behind my own, almost purposeful. Tap, 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 tap. The sound went on and on. Minutes passed, maybe hours, I don't recall. There was no time in that place. It was only sound, my own and my shadows, and soon my labored breathing as my body strained. I dared not run, but I feared that I was losing my race. The echoes seemed to draw nearer every few steps, as if the stride at my back was just a little longer than my own, and soon I perceived quite clearly that final, underlying scrape. I can liken it only to the steel toe of a boot on a dragging gate, or perhaps the barest touch of a sharp edge on stone. I began to breathe heavily with fatigue and gnawing fear. Dream or no, I felt as tired then as I had on any hard day in the waking world. Fire began to grow in my lungs. My legs became heavy. I am no extraordinary man. I spent more time sitting than standing back in Marhow. Even a brief walk was enough to win me, and I had long passed my usual stamina. Deep breaths fell out of me, loud as the wind in this noiseless place, and to my horror, I found my shadow begin to breathe as well, only this echo was not so clever as the mirror of my feet. This breathing was raspy and thick, the lungs of a man who has sat amidst ash and smoke. It drew sharply against my own, unmistakably different. Yet my stalker seemed not to care. The pace did not increase, the echo drew no nearer. In the bright light of day, I might have laughed for how poorly they made the attempt, but there in the dark, I quickened my pace. More time passed. My legs slowed. I was pressing my limits now, and my breathing was deep and dreadful. An ache was running course through my legs, a reminder that I was in no condition for this journey, and my machine was soon to shut down. The footfall echoes were very close now. I feared that if I turned, I would see whatever thing chased me, even in this shrouding dark. I feigned at times to even feel that rasping breath on my neck, though I was sure for the moment, at least, that it was my imagination. Yet I could not help but wonder how long that would remain. Panic began to rise in me. I wondered what I could do. This dream was not allowing me to wake, and whatever chased me would soon be within reach. I had found no escape. Perhaps I could retreat to one of these dark homes, but who was to say any of these doors would open to my hand? I was not even sure there were doors in these buildings. That was only a guess. And if I turned to find out, well, I feared it would alert my pursuer that our fair game was ended, and I was at a great disadvantage. The notion of turning and simply confronting my shadow did cross my mind, but I set it aside as the worst of resorts. I was barely standing now. My legs cramped fiercely and my chest was fire. The barest breeze might have knocked me over, had there been any wind to speak of. Even a moderately capable person could handle me in my sorry state, and even so, I had not a violent bone in my body. What would I do? Slap them? I had thrown but one punch in my existence, and it had been roundly mocked by those who witnessed. No, I think I would be safer to drop down and play dead before I attempt any heroics. As I wondered what I might do to end this terrible race, I was suddenly aware that a red light had appeared ahead. When it had arrived, and for how long it had been, I was unsure, wrapped as I was in my plans of escape, but now that I saw it, I knew that I must at least try to reach that place. With all remaining strength, which I will admit was less than I dare be proud of, I willed myself on. I saw quickly that the light was that of a torch, a dancing flame that shed the first true warmth I had found in that dark city. I was at a near jog now as I reached for it. My pursuer, who had till now played our little game with all the fairness of a proper sportsman, abandoned their mercy. I heard the echoes turn into their own stomping fury, the running of someone or something that had realized their victory was in jeopardy. A gap in the endless stone appeared before me on the left hand, a gate of some sort that led deeper into the city. I broke into what may pitifully be called a sprint at the sight. Behind me, my shadow became a trembling storm, a sound that I beheld as if it had far, far too many feet. The scraping metal became constant, a dragging that squealed in the dark. I turned the corner. The light of the torch overwhelmed me, blinding my eyes that had spent so long in the night. Behind the torch was a high window of stained glass, and behind that stained glass a red curtain. I fell against it without ceremony. My lungs had simply given up, and my legs with them. If my shadow had any cruel intention, it was for their leisure now. The storming feet pounded closer. The stone beneath me began to shake. The torchlight seemed to dim, or so I perceived it, though I will freely admit it may simply have been my own eyes failing as they found themselves with no oxygen to live. The world narrowed into a single circular point of light. The dark shadows around my vision pressed in until I could only see the barest of red. A sound like falling boulders crashed through from the path I had traveled. The red pin of light vanished briefly. Something passed before me. Something I cannot properly recall, so poor was my vigor in that moment, but I swear the shadow which cut off the dancing firelight was that of something like a spider, many-limbed and tall, so terribly tall. It whipped by in an instant, dragging behind it two oddly human arms which fell off its back like a tail, and in hands far, far too similar to my own, it held what may have been a scythe, which scraped along the familiar metal tone. I saw no face, but as the storm passed once more into the shadows on the opposite side of the firelight, I thought I spied a sudden glow of many red eyes pass my direction, ere it went beyond the corner of the wall and was gone. In an instant, the noise faded. The silent night crept back in. That chilled me, for I saw in my mind's eye this creature still lingering just beyond the corner, waiting for this fellow to be foolish enough to creep once more into the dark. Well, listener, I may not be a scholar, but I am no fool. I sighed heavily and fell back against the window again, rattling it with the first sound I could recall that did not send a fearful finger into my heart. "Hello?" A young woman's voice suddenly broke at my back. I yelped and fell forward, away from the window from where the voice had come, though not too far near the corner where my many-legged shadow had gone. I saw in the pane glass, between the red curtains, a shadow shift back and forth. A finger tapped on the glass. "Hello? Is someone there?" the young woman called again. "Hello?" I replied in little more than a whisper, unsure if I wished to add anything for my pursuer to echo. "Oh my, is someone out there?" the woman asked. A hand pressed against the glass and the shadow leaned in. "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else was proper for such a moment. "I did not mean to disturb you. I fell against your window." "Never mind that. What foolish errand has you out in the dark?" the woman asked. "I have no errand. I am only trying to find my home," I said. "Home? Why aren't you home now? The moon went out a week ago. Everyone should be inside. The wise ones have spoken." I frowned at that. I will profess little knowledge of the heavens, but I am fairly certain the moon does not disappear for a week at a time, and I know nothing of wise ones, whoever they may be. I crept near the window and settled in beneath it, as far from my shadow's corner as I could reach, basking in the warmth of the fire. "I'm somewhat new here," I said truthfully. "Is this the city of Curum?" "Curum?" the woman said. "I have not heard that name for some time, sir. Curum is far away, across the divide in the mountains. You are in Ostwich." I searched my memories then for that name, Ostwich, but I found it missing. I remembered distantly an old tale with a similar sound, a story out of the old lands where kingdoms rose and fell, but that name had been slightly askew. Ostwain, if I recall rightly, and all who had ever spoken of it did so in fiction. The woman's voice pulled me out of my searching suddenly. "You best be to your home, traveler. The moon will not rise for another 3 days, and you shan't survive in the dark." "Survive what?" I said, forgetting then my search for the ancient name. I swore for a moment there came a sound like many shuffling toes just beyond the corner. "Oh dear, you truly are new," the woman said. "I regret that my door is barred with the great seal, else I would let you in for your own sake. You will need to find the harbor. The watchmen keep that place safe. They will let you in." "Miss, what am I surviving?" I asked once more. "I am not entirely certain, traveler. I have lived my whole life with the customs of my city, and every 6th moon we must bar the door and wait, lest the dark take those who wander. None live outside the tower who know what causes this unrest, but all who go beyond the safety of light and home on these nights are seen no more. It is the imitator's eve this night. The wailing host shall come soon, and I fear you are too late to escape it. Another shuffling of skittering feet came from beyond the corner. I thought I saw, but only briefly, the flash of red eyes peek around the shadow, causing my heart to leap. But it faded, and I leaned against the cool glass of the stranger's window. I don't know what any of that is, I said again, truthfully. For surely I knew nothing of an Ostwich or its moons, or why one might flee the dark, though I was beginning to gather an inkling. Perhaps the tower may enlighten thee, traveler, but here I can offer only one wise adage. Chase the light, and flee the hungering dark. I think I already have, I said, more to myself than the mysterious window. And more must be fled ere you come to the harbor, the woman said. Take my torch, traveler. The fire is only needed on the eve of winter's hand, and that is past. It will do you more good than I. Take it and travel this road for a time. You will find the signs which show the way to the harbor, though I admit I hold no hope you will pass safely. The imitators shall not trouble you in the light, but those that cry shall not care for light or flame. If you have not reached the harbor ere the first verse sings, I fear no safe end for you. I reached out and clasped the torch in my hand. The warmth of the fire was comforting. Perhaps the first comfort I had found in my nightmare. I do not understand any of this, I said as I stared into the flames. I wish there was time to expound, traveler, but your moments are short already. Turn inward to the city and run, and do not stop for sight or sound. If you reach the harbor, you will be safe. But as it is said, woe to the wandering soul who walks the starless night. Fare thee well. The shadow retreated into the dark of the window and was lost. There were many questions I would yet ask her, but as I reached to tap the glass, at my back I heard the skittering sound and the dragging scrape of metal. I shuddered at the windowsill and lowered my hand. For a brief moment, I thought I should look out with this torch, to see what strange thing had passed by my sight in the alley, but I decided against it at the last. Whether this woman spoke true or was but a figment of this endless weary dream, she was adamant of my predicament. So I turned and faced the road which went on towards what I assumed to be the city interior. An endless black stretched before me, pushed back barely by my orange flame. I took a step into that void. The path beyond the gate was made of smooth, crafted stone. It reminded me of Marhow, the streets back home where I took long walks beneath pale blue skies. But this street was dark, held under by a suffocating empty that offered no heaven or hope. It went ahead for a tireless distance, always out of reach of my torch. I was a single star, surrounded by pitiless night. I had gone not half a mile, by my reckoning, when there came from afar the sound of a bell tolling, long and loud, 3 times true and 4 more echoed. I had not the faintest idea what such a warning might mean in far Ostwich. Was it the hour? Was it a warning of a near dawn? Perhaps it was something more dire. Several steps more I took when I heard again the sound of the bell. This time, however, it came not from the distance, but near at hand, soft and shallow, like the muffled shouting of an arguing man heard from behind a door. It tolled 3 times, but there were no echoes beneath it, only a weighty quiet. When it ended, I saw, for the briefest moment, a flash of white light somewhere far away, making an outline of sharp, pointed buildings and wild, rambling iron that made the city. Not long enough to understand the layout, I fear, but enough to hold my eye for a long while. Then another burst of white came from my left, this one hidden well beyond sight, for I caught only the faintest gray eddies that washed over my way. my heart stopped cold. In the quickly fading shade, I beheld up high, peering down over cracked roof slats, a watching figure. I dare not say it was living, for I fear my soul could not withstand, but I could imagine no statue which even the strangest man might set in such a place. Certainly not one with endless eyes so carefully detailed about its round head. Panic pushed me into gear, and I stepped lively down the road. I did not run. Whatever specters may haunt the rooftops, they had not accosted me yet, and as I had with my mimicking shadow, I would play the longest game, hoping for a similar, victorious end. For some time I went, my heels the only sound in the world. Now and then my torch would catch the glass of a hidden window, shrouded behind heavy curtains, and I at one point swear I saw a watching face from beyond such a portal, but I dared not stop to look. There were no more white flashes for the night, yet I could not convince myself if it was a blessing or a curse, for the light of the torch did not reach the high rooftops, ending only just above the second-story windows which went on endlessly. Finally, after much walking and much more worry, I came to a place where the houses on my left broke apart, becoming another wide road that went in towards another part of Ostwich. There, at last, I did linger, for my friendly window guide had told me I would find such signs as were needed, and indeed there were signs, or so I thought them to be. In chalk the color of ash, set upon a red brick wall, I saw a drawn figure of a ship with open sails, and at its fore a pointing shape of a gull, beak turned to the inner road. I admit, listener, that never before have I taken my orders from a wall, but in that hour I chose to do so. I had gone for some time, long enough that the ashen ship had been nearly forgotten, when I heard another toll of bells rise. It was stronger now, nearer, a clear bronze with a high-pitched tail that lingered in my ears. I expected 4 strikes, as was the manner of things in all right places of the world. But the bell came only twice, and then ended. Silence rushed in. Nothing followed. Perturbed, but not entirely lost, I halted there on the street and waited, for who knew if another flash of pale light would come? Perhaps my path would be revealed to me then, though I did dread what might be looking down from the heights. But no light came. Darkness settled in, a permanent guest, and my eager waiting turned to anxious watching. Then a sound broke the quiet. 2 bells, 2 echoing, muffled, all too near bells. 2 strikes, one upon another, coming from just above my head. Panic ensued, and in the rush I forgot nearly all my friendly window had told me of this strange night. I ran forward with all the wings terror might give, until my heart beat louder than any bells ever could, and my lungs ached with need for air. Still I ran. I did not stop. I did not halt. I turned neither left nor right and dared not lift my eyes to see what followed. Streets came and went. I tried as I could to gather what lay beyond them, but the first I passed only ruptured what little courage remained. I saw, in a fleeting orange light, a shape retreat into the dark of a wayward road, something long and lithe, with toes that scraped the stone with iron nails. Had there been another ashen sign there? Another path for me to follow? I could not know. My feet would not allow me to stop, though my lungs were quickly presenting counter-arguments to be considered. So lost was I in terror that I do not think I noticed the first sound of a haunting song that came up out of the far city. It was distant, barely more than the aftermath of a struck chord, but eventually it found a way into my horrified ears, and the melody slowed my step to that of a brisk walk. I was dazed. My eyes tingled with black dots and swirling nothing, threatening to drop where I stood no matter how deeply I inhaled. Under me, my legs wavered, suddenly lost of the adrenaline that drove them, and now realizing they were not cut out for such work. I stopped at last and fell to a knee, hoping a brief respite might bring me back to a place of vigor. Only when I had rested a moment, focusing on the flicker of the torch, did I begin to hear the song which had interrupted my frightful travel. It was a wailing, drawn thing. A single note stretched over the entirety of a verse, scratching through the alleys and over homes to fill every corner of my street. A thought came to me as I listened. Had the windowed lady not warned me of something similar? No, she had called my watch to someone crying, if I remember right. Though, as I lingered and listened, it struck me that such a sound could indeed be a cry, if one had the belly for such a long and painful note. It came without ceasing, shifting in pitch by only the faintest waves, like still waters of a pond pushed gently by a breeze. The longer I listened, the more I beheld foulness in its sound. A gritty, piercing floor held it aloft, something I did not notice at first, but now that I heard it, I could not think of as anything but the shout of a man deep in his despair. For a time I debated what to do. I could not stay there in the road, that much my windowed lady had been clear on, but I was certain she had warned me of such crying people ere I left her sill, and I had quite forgotten if there was a plan to follow. I resolved soon to press forward, but that I should turn to the right if I found another crossroad. If the road I was currently on led to the center of the city, and, I should note, I had no idea if it did, then the sound of the cries must have come from the very middle of it all. I would dare a side street, maps, markings, or no, if only to be away from that wretched, crawling note. It did not take long to reach the next crossroad. It was only a few houses down. But alas, listener, when I arrived, I indeed found an ashen marker. Only this marker was on the very road I traveled, being that of a ship's captain with his hand outstretched, pointing down the same path I wished nothing more than to be off of. I thought, for a moment, that I might ignore the sign. After all, harbor or no, and I was increasingly skeptical there was a harbor in the center of the city, would it be of any real aid if I ran headlong into the creeping whale? Yet, as I thought to turn, I caught in my ear that the crying horror had changed. Where before it seemed only to be ahead of me, far in the black sky, now I heard it rising from all sides, pushing out of every side street and cracked brick. It was still loudest in the direction I walked, but no longer was I sure I would be free if I turned aside. Another bell rang out. A single, terrible gong. This one I heard as clearly as if I stood at the foot of its church, and for a brief respite the wailing cry halted. Silence filled. Then, far away, I heard another muffled bell echo, one single, solitary strike. It sounded far away this time, no longer hanging over my head, and I realized then that whatever creature had stirred me had itself decided against going on the way I chose. That did not comfort me, though, for now I feared only another, greater danger lie in wait, a danger even stalking bells did not care to contend with. On the last gasp of the echoing bell, the wailing cries returned. They filled every street now. Turning would be of no help. I cursed aloud to the dark, doubtful anyone could hear me over the clamor, and ground my heel into the stone. My strength had mostly returned as I waited and listened. I had one last gasp in me. Leaving aside the crossroads, I rushed on into the dark. The crying note drew nearer, piercing now, even to my bones, like shards of glass beneath my skin. The stones at my feet began to shake. Though I admit now it may have been fear causing it to be so, not a true act of the earth. I was running headlong into the night with no idea and no hope of what I would find, and every step brought painfully nearer the now shrill tone that filled the air. Suddenly, a white light bloomed before me. Ahead, perhaps 3 houses or 4, something like a lantern, but lit silver as the moon, burst up and into the sky. Beneath it, in sharp relief, stood a single man, dressed in robes of black and red, with a hat of a holy man on his head. He was staring up towards the light, a grim look on his face. Beyond the man, clambering down the road, and lit now as a horde of rumbling limbs and clustered flesh, was a muster of creatures I had seen never before, nor wished to ever see again. They were thin and frail, entirely naked, built like men who have gone too long without nourishment. Their bellies were distended and their limbs were weak, but their heads, oh, listener, their heads. Atop a post-like neck sat something akin to the bulb of a plant, only split down the middle and open wide in a maw of gaping, razor teeth. Within the maw, a throat of red and black undulated the wailing, horrible chorus. These were certainly the criers, and I was nearly upon them. "Help!" I cried to the man standing lonely where the light was quickly fading. In the last glance of silver, he turned and saw me, and then black night returned. I ran on, pressing for the last memory my eyes could find of that face, and I nearly screamed when he suddenly appeared, leaping out of the dark and into my orange light. "Come quickly," he demanded, reaching out a hand. I took it and he led me on. The cries were a raging sea now, a tempest on the doorstep, ready to sweep me away. The man brought me to a door of iron and oak, the front porch of a church, or so it seemed. He swung it inward and pulled me with him, and when we both were over the threshold, he turned and put his weight behind the door. It groaned, slowly closed, an agonizing pace, though it had no doubt been ordinary and my mind only frazzled. Before the last gasp of night was closed off, I saw a single, pale blue hand with 8 bony, mangled fingers reach over the sliver of space. Then it was gone. The door was shut. "What ragged fool are you, running out on the wailing chorus?" the man demanded as soon as the great door closed. He was standing with folded arms across a broad chest, glaring out under his priestly hat. A black bush of a beard was on his face, and it turned down in a searing frown. I did not answer at once. First, for my gasping breath and aching limbs, but later for the sharp stare the man had coming out of his eyes. There was a keenness in his gaze that pierced down into dark places, erasing the walls of wit and wile, to see things hidden that even I was not sure existed within the cage of my bones. Under it, I forgot, if for the briefest moment, the notion of dreams, nightmares, far green countries, and shadowed imitations of my home. Here, in these eyes, was truth. Perhaps all truth. And it was a dauntless rock which could not be shifted by the wavering tempest of imagination and fancy. "Well, you deaf or just dumb?" the man asked. As if to accentuate him, the fireplace upon the east wall snapped. What were those?" was all I managed. It was hardly the brightest or best question, but I think I should be forgiven for the terrors of my night. The priestly man looked once to the door with his hard stare, then back to me, now raising a confused brow. "What sort of man are you, out and about with no knowledge of the days?" the man asked. "And what are these clothes? Is this a nightshirt? Did you jump out of a window after a long sleep? Speak, child, and tell me what madman I deal with." "I am Calen," I said, finally recovered enough to speak a coherent thought. "I am from Marhow, and I have no idea where I am." "Marhow," the man said quizzically. He looked down to the snapping fire, and a pondering look came over him. "Marhow," he said again slowly. "That name strikes a familiar chord, but I cannot recall why. Perhaps another might know, but it matters little now. You are inside, and that is enough. Come, sit by the fire and warm your toes. The night cannot reach you any longer." I took this offer eagerly, finding a seat of leather and down. As I went, I looked into the church that was my salvation. It was small, much smaller than it had seemed from afar, though I admit the size of it was hardly at the front of my mind as I ran. Along the far wall, tapestry hung, colored red and gold and white. It was long, perhaps 30 feet or more, and it had many devices and symbols on it that rimmed the edges. In the center of the tapestry was a mysterious scene. There was a city and a land and a great many villages about it. But on the next part, the land and the villages were vanished, and only the city remained. On the third part, the city was beset by what I thought to be reaching branches of a tree, or the poison whips of vine, and on the fourth, a looming shadow stood over the walls. The fifth was the last scene. It was larger than the rest, and showed the city in more detail. I took it to be Ostwich, though it had no name. From the center of the city, a white light shone out, and it pushed back against a dark cloud that had enveloped it. Beneath the light was a small figure, standing with arms outstretched, and before the figure, a cheering crowd. My eyes passed from the tapestry to the rear of the sanctuary. I gasped aloud, for I saw, leaning against the back wall on a small chair, a sunken form, bent over and hidden in heavy cloth. The priestly man heard my gasp and followed my gaze. "Heed no fear, stranger. That is Ilya, a ward of the church. It was she who would have rescued you, had you the misfortune to arrive some 20 years ago. But now she sleeps, and waits for the days of dark to end." "Days of dark," I echoed softly. "What is this tapestry behind me? I have never seen such a work." "I will tell you, but first a name." The man reached over with an outstretched hand. I took it and we shook, and as he leaned back, he said, "I am Thaddeus, eye of the church, and that," he pointed to the tapestry, "is the salvation of man." I turned back once more to behold the work. It did not look like salvation. It looked more like desperate survival. "Salvation from what?" I asked. To my surprise, Thaddeus began to laugh. "From the very things you so nearly escaped," he said. Salvation was an arrogant word, but the artist was an arrogant woman. Most would call it now relief of man, for that is all it is offered. "Relief from that?" I nodded my head towards the shut door dancing in the firelight. Thaddeus nodded. "Indeed, it is not much, but it is all that it can be." He shifted in his chair to lean over, such that his glinting eyes were now brightly lit in the fire. He set the weighty gaze upon me again, but this time it was friendly and warm, and he smiled, such that I felt as if many burdens were taken off me in that moment. He began to speak once more. "Tell me, Calen, this Marhow you say you come from, what manner of city is it? Is it a dark place? Does mankind still dwell there, or are other things taken root?" "Other things?" I said, confused. "I'm not sure what else could be there, unless you mean the pets or burden beasts. Mankind has held Marhow forever, for mankind is the only creature capable." "Is it?" Thaddeus said, for I was not sure it was a question. "Well, you would know best your own city. Where does it sit, if I might ask?" "I am not sure how to answer that," I said truthfully. "I rarely left the city, and there were few villages nearby to put a distance on. I know there was a place called Curum, but it is many leagues distant, across a great lake, and much land I am not familiar with." "Curum? I've heard that name," Thaddeus said. He rose suddenly and went to a place beneath the tapestry, to a bookshelf that was riddled with dusty tomes. He pulled one out, a red, leather-bound thing, with a strip of black cloth to mark it. This he brought once more to sit at the fire. "Curum, Curum," he repeated aloud, as if summoning a memory he had stored far away. "Ah, yes, I knew that name was remembered here. Curum, the city of knights, the city of kings' knights. Yes." He looked up and his eyes became dark. "Curum disappeared over a millennia ago, long before the dark and the devil's eve." I frowned. That was certainly not right. Curum, while distant and unfamiliar, was definitely still there, else I would not have heard so many fellow citizens of Marhow wonder about it. "I think you are mistaken," I said. "Curum has never fallen, so far as I know. It's built in a mountain inlet with treacherous shoal at its feet. no army would consider it worth taking. It was Thaddeus' turn to frown now. "No," he said with a shake of his head. "Curum stood in a wide field of high grass, surrounded on all sides by a threefold moat, looking upon the passes of—" He looked down to his book. "The Ardent Mountains. It was certainly near no sea or inlet." "That is wrong," I said, more to myself than Thaddeus. No, it is quite right," a frail voice suddenly interrupted. Ilya, who had thus far moved not an inch, was now rising from her chair. She was bent and frail, and her hair fell in thin strands from beneath a red hood. A walking cane was in her right hand, which she leaned on as she shuffled near us. "I do not recall your Marhau, child, but I have read enough of Curum to know it is not fiction. It was there, long ago, over the mountains far. So the songs say. Pass me by, O solid night, reprieve my fear like Curum's eyes. It vanished ere the dark came, or perhaps with it. Who can really say what is true so long ago?" "With all respect, ma'am, I cannot believe you," I protested. "Oh, you should, lad. I was the eye before Thad here, and I saw farther afield than any of my day. Even met the right hand once, when I was young." "The right... I don't know what any of those are," I said. "This is all confusing to me. I've never heard of Ostwich or hands or eyes or any of this." Thaddeus looked as if he was about to speak, but at that moment a sound interrupted us. There was a crash at the door as something heavy fell against the wood. The handle began to wiggle as a force on the other side sought to pry it open. "Is it not locked?" I cried, jumping to my feet. "It does not need to be. The creatures do not enter," Thaddeus shouted, rushing for the door. But it was too late. The door swung open. A figure jumped inside. For a brief, terrible moment, the entire sanctuary was filled with the horrible, scratching chorus of the wailing host. And then it was silenced once more as the door fell swiftly back into place. Thaddeus reached down into his cloak. I saw out of the corner of my eye that he had a sword there, hidden among the folds. It was halfway from its scabbard when a voice came from the sudden intruder. "Oh there, put down the silverware and let a man breathe," it said. The man at the door was a tall, lanky fellow, dressed entirely in a tuxedo and a comically tall top hat. His face was clean-shaven and sharp, and his smile was charming, but as I looked into his eyes, I had a brief moment of déjà vu, as if I knew this man, but could not remember where we had met. "Who are you?" Thaddeus demanded, hands still on the hilt of his sword. The man at the door looked once to Thaddeus, then to me, and a bewildered smile came over him. "A friend of Calen, of course." He tucked his hand into his pockets and strode forward to the nearest chair, settling in like a noodle being bent into all sorts of shapes. "I don't know you," I declared, though I was not entirely sure that was true. Then, as I watched, the man tilted his head down so that the brim of the top hat covered his eyes. With a single finger, he lifted the brim, looking out from under the corner. "Neater?" I said, curious as to how the name had even found my lips. "The only one," the man said, bowing over his knees. "Oh," I said. It hit me then. I was surely dreaming. This was downright absurd. Neater was now in the form of a tall, gangly man, where before he had been a wretched, wrinkled mess. That settled it for me. I had certainly fallen into a horrible nightmare. There was no other explanation. "This Neater's a friend?" Thaddeus asked. "I suppose," I shrugged. At that moment, I had given up caring what happened next. If this was a dream, I was done putting effort into it. I decided then I would simply roll with whatever came. If it was dark and horrible, then so be it. I would wake in the end. But I was done trying to make sense of it all. "Ah, he's modest. I'm the one that had him sent on his merry way and had him end up here," Neater said. Then he frowned and looked about. "Where's the old lady?" he wondered. My eyes turned to Ilya, who was stuck now halfway between her original chair and the chairs by the fire. Neater followed along, and when he saw her standing there, shook his head. No, not that one. The old one. The one I gave you the pendant for. You didn't lose my pendant, did you? Do you mean guide? I asked, thinking back to the crow who had become a woman in the house of books and cloth. Ha! What a sentence. This was a dream worth retelling one day. Is that the name you two came to? Nita asked. Not my business. She's higher up the ladder, does what she wants. Would have expected her here, though. Where is she? I have not seen her, I declared. Nita's gaze darkened. That is not good, he said. Why? I asked. If nothing else, I could not complain that this dream was boring. Nita dropped a critical eye on me, as if he was not sure I was jesting. Did she not tell you? He asked. She's supposed to tell you. Tell me what? I said. Nita hummed along. He turned his gaze to the priest and the old woman, bouncing between them for a moment. His hands began to wrap his knees, and a nervous tap took over his foot. I'm not really supposed to be talking about it in front of the others, he said slowly. But she was supposed to tell you. Okay, I've made up my mind, he declared, rising suddenly from the chair. His shadow leaped out like a spider into the far tapestry. Calen, priest fellow, old lady, sit and listen, because I have a story, and we are running out of hours.